It is time for the best book of all time, in my opinion, and that is the one and only Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, and I love this book. Welcome back to another Reviews by Beth video, and today we are tackling one of the greatest books ever written. Now, the reason I picked this up is because I thought I'd do a little review on my favourite book ever, and also because I feel like I haven't talked about too many of the classics, and as much as I love modern literature, and I think some of the new modern books that talk about our society and the way our society is shaped and formed nowadays are amazing, there's just something so good about a classic book, and especially one that is Pride and Prejudice by the one and only Jane Austen. Now, my fascination started with classics and with Jane Austen from a young age. I was such a bookworm. Like, I would be reading all the time. I read everything I could possibly read when I was young, when I was at primary school. And my mum, I remember distinctly, we went into the library and my mum was like, she's read everything. She's read everything. We need to get her something else. So then they said, well, how about some classics? So we did a few Charles Dickens novels. And when I first read my Jane Austen novel, I just fell in love. I just think she is one of the greatest writers of all time. And yeah, she's just insane. I was also really lucky to be able to study her for like a portion of my university degree, and I just wish we had longer on her because I could study this woman for ages. But anyway, if you don't know the plot or kind of the storyline of Pride and Prejudice, well, have you been living under a rock? But if you haven't, then it is basically a love story. So there is a family called the Bennets and they have 5 daughters. So we have Mrs. and Mr. Bennet, who are characters in themselves, very comedic, especially Mrs. Bennet, and their polar opposites just work alongside each other really well. And then you have 5 very different sisters who are all looking for love, because when you have, in those days, not a boy, when you have, hang on, so if you don't have a boy in the family, which the Bennets don't, you don't have an heir to leave all your stuff to, meaning that everyone in your family is basically screwed. So Mrs. Bennet, she wants to marry off all of her 5 children, and so she puts them all out in society and is trying to get them married off. So that is the premise of the story. We meet many different characters. It is mainly centred around the character of Lizzie, or Elizabeth Bennet, and we see her tackle through some tricky situations of romance, of economics. It is actually the original enemies to lovers trope, and I'm here for it. We also see quite a few other love stories with Jane, who is her eldest sister. So Elizabeth is the second of 5, and we do mainly focus up on her. But this story is just, it's loved by many for such a great reason, and it's because it's just written so well. I have to say, one of the things that people get mixed up about classics is the fact that they have to be serious and that they have to be boring, and that there is, when you talk about a classic, it's almost talked about like, oh, it has to be talked about in a certain way because everybody has to speak very highly of it, and it's only taught in academia settings and things like that, and no, you can't read them for fun. And I want to put an end to that now, because it's completely the opposite way. I think also you've got to approach these books with just kind of an open mind. Don't go into it going, oh, I'm just reading a classic, it's going to be boring. There are so many comedic parts of this book, and I've actually been listening to it recently again, and it's just so funny. It is really, really funny. Like the character of Mr. Collins, who comes to the Bennet's home, is just so funny, and there's just some brilliant moments in there. And I do think that this is a comedy, it's a romance, it's a drama, it's got it all packed in there. I think obviously the best thing about this book is its romance, and also it does a really good job of kind of taking, especially if you haven't read Pride and Prejudice or haven't watched it, because I know there's a really famous film with Keira Knightley in it, but it takes you through kind of the different kind of options for Elizabeth, and we kind of go through the trials and tribulations with her in regards to making sure that she has a husband, but also this girl knows her own mind. She wants to marry someone for love. She doesn't want to just marry for economic stability, and we see that, and that is very cool. You know, there are some strong female characters in here, which is not what you think about for its time, and I love a strong female character. But we see her go through many different romance tropes. So we see her with an enemies to lovers with the famous Mr. Darcy, who I think every single woman who has read or watched Pride and Prejudice has fallen in love with. I mean, it's kind of hard not to. But we also see kind of the complicated emergence of a relationship between her and Mr. Wickham and what happens there. And then we also see so the first love story that we get is between Mr. Bingley and Jane, and so we see that beautiful and also complicated relationship between those two. No love story in this is straightforward. It's all complex in a time where it's meant to be you meet someone, you get married, you're settled, you're good. It's not like that, and it's good. It's interesting, but the characters are very well formed. The plot is extremely good, and the characters just make the story, really. And it's interesting to see such a feminist writer in such a different time. But yes, this is definitely my favourite classic, and I also love so many others of Jane Austen's. If you haven't, go and read Persuasion, Emma. Those are some really good ones as well. I think Persuasion is very much so more of a romance novel, but I think people also, this is another thing, Emma is also extremely funny. That is meant to be a comedy. Please, if you pick up Emma, get it with the fact that it is meant to be really funny, because it is, and the characters are just so ridiculous. Oh, she always likes a bit of romance in her novels, does Miss Jane Austen. But yeah, those are some incredible, I mean, they're all incredible, let's be honest, they're all incredible, but if I had to choose one, it would be this. So obviously, because it is my favourite book, I'm going to give this one a 5 out of 5 stars. I mean, how couldn't you? If you haven't already, go and read Pride and Prejudice, because it is phenomenal. Thanks for watching, and as always, if you want to support the channel, it would be greatly appreciated if you could like, comment and subscribe and do all of those things. But also, if you want to buy the books, you can through my Amazon links, or support the channel through my Patreon. Thanks, bye bye!